Hey, what's up guys? In this video we're going to be taking a look at the Uniden DFR9, and specifically we're going to take a look at the different features and options. We're going to go over all the different buttons that it has and then dive into the menu and explain all the different settings so that you can get it programmed for the highest level of performance and minimal false alerts. Now, down in the video description, there's going to be a bunch of additional information for you. Since this video may be fairly long here, if there's a specific feature that you're wondering about, I'm going to have an outline with timestamps as far as the different features that we talk about and when in the video they take place. So if you want to skip to a particular setting or option, take a look down there. If you'd prefer reading over everything, I'm also going to link you to the setup tutorial that I have written on my website that explains all of this in text if you don't necessarily want to watch the whole video. Additionally, at the end of that article, you're also going to find my general recommended settings as well as the settings that I run here where I live. And then finally, if you want to purchase a detector, you'll also find the link down there to pick one of these up. So with that said, let's go ahead and hop on over and take a look at all these settings and options. Now, looking at the top of the detector here, we've got our button for power, volume up and down. We're going to go into the menu, and then we have options to control the muting the detector, GPS lockouts, adjust the display brightness, as well as manually marking GPS locations. And well, let's take a look at those. The power button, of course, will allow us to turn the detector on and off. Pretty simple and self-explanatory. The volume buttons we can adjust right here, and they're also going to allow us to, once we go into the menu, to kind of go back and forth through the different options. The menu button right here will actually take us into the menu, and we can use the volume buttons to kind of go through the different options here, as you can see. If we press and hold the menu button, that'll allow us to actually exit the menu. And that is also going to do some navigation stuff I'll show you here toward the end of the video. And then when we're in the main screen like this, see how we're set up in advanced mode? There's a couple different sensitivity levels we can choose from, and if you press and hold the menu button, it'll allow you to switch between the different sensitivity levels like this. Now the buttons here on the front of the detector, when you get an alert, if you want to mute the alert, you just press the mute button right here. When you come across a stationary false alert on maybe X-band or K-band, such as a speed sign on the side of the road or an automatic door opener, you can double press the mute button, and that will teach the detector this is a false alert so that it will remember this and mute it for you again in the future when you come by next time. The detector can store up to 500 GPS lockout locations like this. If you ever want to delete any of those false alert locations, maybe you create it by mistake, just double press the mute button again when you are in the presence of that false alert. Now the dim button right here, if we press and hold the button, it's going to allow us to adjust the display brightness. So we've got a couple different options here. Dark mode like this is basically going to have the display off until we actually get an alert, and then it'll light up. Off will have the display off entirely whether there's an alert or not. And then automatic display brightness adjustments will allow us to have the detector brighter in the daytime and darker at night. And when you have it set to automatic mode, there's actually an option in the menu, which we'll show you here in just a minute, to adjust how bright or how dark it gets. Now the mark button here on the side, if you press that, it'll go ahead and create a user mark in this location so that every time you drive by here, the detector will notify you again. So if maybe this is a common speed trap or something, you can have the detector remind you every time you come by this location. If you want to delete that location, next time you drive by and the alert pops up on your detector, just press the mark button again, and it'll give you the ability to delete that. Now, if you want to delete all of the user marks in the detector, you can just press and hold the mark button like this, and you'll see it'll actually pop up the option to delete all of your user mark locations. Press it again a second time, and it'll go ahead and clear all of your manual user marks. Now, diving into the menu itself, let's go ahead and do that. So the first option that it's going to give us is the ability to control the sensitivity of the detector. There's three different options. There is highway mode, like this, which is going to be full sensitivity on all bands. There's city mode, which reduces X-band and K-band sensitivity down to about 10% or so. And then there's advanced mode, which allows us to fine-tune exactly how sensitive the detector is on X-band, K-band, and Ka-band. Now, something to note is the advanced mode does not actually enable any additional advanced functionality like you'll see with some other detectors. All it's doing is giving us the ability to fine-tune exactly how sensitive it is on X-band, K-band, and Ka. Now, when you have it set to advanced mode, it's going to give us a couple different options. You can see we now have the ability to control X-band sensitivity. We can go all the way down to 40% sensitivity in 20% increments, or back up to 100%. If you want to maybe back down K-band sensitivity to help cut down on some false alerts, you can do that here. Just be aware that, of course, this also affects legitimate alerts too, not just false alerts. And then if you want to adjust Ka-band sensitivity, which usually isn't a good idea, you'll want to run it at max sensitivity, but you do have that option here. Now moving on, if you want to turn all of the GPS related functionality and features, if you want to turn that on or off, you have that capability. You can turn on speed camera notifications, for example, to get alerted when you're approaching a speed camera. And you also have that option for red light cameras. If you want, you can also use the mute button to mute those alerts when you come by, or permanently delete them if you like as well. Red light camera quiet ride, you can think of that as high-speed muting. So if you're traveling maybe above this speed, you want the red light cameras to mute. This is a useful feature if you're driving on the highway, for example, and maybe there's a red light camera on a nearby surface street. If you're traveling above this street or above this speed, it's like, okay, chances are you're on the highway, not on city streets, and so it's going to go ahead and mute them for you. That's a useful feature. Next, we have the ability to turn the voice on and off.
Voice on.
If you turn it on, you'll get these beeps like this.
KA frequency, voice off. KA frequency, voice on.
So you have the ability to not only get the beeps here, but it'll also speak what the different options are. Plus, whenever you get a radar alert, it'll say K-band or KA-band or something.
Voice off.
Personally, I like it off just to be a quieter experience. You still hear all the beeps and the ramp up and everything. It just gives you a quieter experience overall, and I don't necessarily need the voice, but you've got that option there. Now, KA frequency voice, this is different. The idea here is when you come across a KA-band signal, if you want it to speak the frequency and say something like 34.72, for example, it can actually announce the frequency itself out to 2 decimal places. That way you get a little bit more information. So for those of you guys who are more advanced users and you want to know the exact frequency of the signal without having to look over at the detector can announce it for you. Next, we have the ability to turn individual bands on and off. So X-band, for example, it's only used actively in Ohio and southern New Jersey and a few rural places here and there around the country, but in most places you can turn X-band off because otherwise you're going to get exclusively false alerts. K-band is used almost everywhere in the country. Most of California it's not used, but pretty much everywhere else you're going to want K-band turned on. And then KA-band is used pretty much everywhere, so you'll want to have that turned on as well. Laser, if you'd like laser detection here, you can turn it on or off. Of course, it's no substitute for laser jammers, but if you'd like laser detection here in your radar detector, of course, you can leave it turned on. KA pop. Pop radar is a type of very, very quick radar that's designed specifically to attempt to defeat radar detectors. Unfortunately, it's got a number of different issues, which I've talked about in the past, and it's not really used much in practice. It's not legal to be used itself to issue tickets, and for that reason, most people actually turn off pop detection. You're going to get rid of all the pop false alerts that you'll otherwise get. You'll get better performance with the feature turned off. It's not really in use, and so for most people, turn off KA-band pop detection. Next, we've got the K-band filter. This is going to help filter out blind spot falses and whatnot, so you'll definitely want to have it turned on. It's not going to filter out every single one. Of course, no detector can do that, but it definitely helps. Next is the KA-band filter to help filter out false alerts from maybe other sources of KA-band, such as maybe leaky radar detectors nearby and whatnot. Generally speaking, false alerts on KA-band are pretty rare, and I don't see a ton of them here with the DFR9 or anything, so most people would tend to turn it off, which is the default, and you're going to get a little bit better performance. If you disable that false alert filter, maybe you'll get a few false alerts, but again, it doesn't really seem to happen very often, so most people wind up turning it off. Next is the traffic sensor filter, or TSF. This is designed to filter out traffic sensors that blast K-band on the sides of some highways. So if you're driving in an area where you're seeing repeated K-band false alerts on the highway, and they're not coming from maybe blind spot falses and whatnot, so maybe every mile, every half mile, the detector goes off to K-band, try turning on the traffic sensor filter, and it should be able to help you filter those out. Next, we have the ability to adjust how wide the frequency range is that the detector will scan for on K-band. We've got the option for K-narrow for a narrower range of frequencies, or K-band wide to scan for all the frequencies used here in the US. This is a way to basically help kind of cut off some of the kind of upper and lower end spectrum of K-band, where there's generally going to be more false alerts than anything. So if you want to maybe help cut down some of the false alerts and you don't have a lot of K-band in use in your area, this is one tool that you have at your disposal. But be aware that K-band can be used anywhere in the frequency range that K-band wide is sweeping for, and so if you have a lot of K-band in use in your area especially, I would recommend leaving it set to K-band wide. Next, we've got KA-band narrow. There's 2 different options here. There's KA wide and KA narrow. Now, this is similar to K-band wide and narrow. KA narrow is going to basically reduce a very wide range of frequencies, KA wide, down to a much smaller range of frequencies, basically around 33.8, 34.7, and 35.5, plus a little buffer on either side where the radar guns are designed to operate in. Now, this is really nice because radar gun manufacturers, they actually design their radar guns to only operate within smaller subsections of all of Ka bands, so it helps maybe filter out some of the false alerts that you would otherwise see, plus you are going to get better performance when the detector is sweeping for a smaller range of frequencies. And so most people will run actually Ka narrow. The only times maybe you'd want to run K band or Ka band wide is if you're in an area such as like around New York, where maybe stalker guns, for example, around 34/7 tend to drift higher or lower, especially higher, beyond the range that Ka band narrow would scan for. If you're worried about out of tune guns, Ka band wide would be the way to go. Otherwise, for most people, Ka band narrow is the best option. Next, we have the ability to adjust what the detector does if it sees multiple alerts. So one, we've got signal priority. The other one is Ka band priority. Now, the idea here is with signal priority, let's say you have one really strong signal and one really weak signal, but they're on different bands. Which one would the detector alert you to? Good question. So let's say, for example, we have a really strong K-band signal, but a really weak Ka-band signal. Do we want to be alerted to the really strong K-band signal, which is really close and it's what we're encountering right now? Or maybe do we want to be alerted to the Ka-band signal that's more likely to be legitimate, but farther away? Does that make sense? We have the ability to adjust how the detector is going to alert us and which signals get priority. In signal priority, the strongest signal is the one that the detector is going to be visually and audibly alerting to. So in this example, the stronger, closer K-band signal is the one that would get priority. On the other hand, if we say, well, that's cool, but usually, maybe where I drive, K-band is a false, I could be passing a speed sign, but I want to know about the officer further down the street, I want the Ka-band signal to have priority. In that instance, you can set the detector to Ka priority, and the detector will alert you to Ka by default. Next, we've got our GPS lockout control. So by default, GPS lockouts are only going to affect X-band and K-band, but if you want, you can also give yourself the ability to lock out Ka-band signals. Now, Ka-band is almost always a legitimate alert, so it's really risky to lock out Ka-band signals, and for that reason, by default, the detector is set up to only give you the option to lock out X-band and K-band. A lot of manufacturers don't even give you the ability to lock out Ka because it can be so risky. Now, that said, it's nice to have the option because from time to time you may come across a speed sign that transmits on Ka-band, or maybe there's a satellite dish on a house that also operates on Ka-band, and so every time you drive by, you're going to get a Ka-band false by that house. And for that reason, if that's what you encounter, you can switch it over to give yourself the ability to also lock out Ka-band and, well, lock out those sources of false alerts. But again, be very clear that Ka-band is almost always legitimate and it can be risky to do this. So only do this if you're very sure that the signals that you're encountering are definitely false alerts. Next, we have the all threat display, and this is going to be really helpful for giving the detector the ability to display multiple alerts simultaneously. On the left side of the screen right here, it can display various information such as your speed, heading, altitude, etc., which we'll cover here in just a second. But what you can have the detector do is when you're detecting multiple signals, it'll display the primary signal right here and up to 3 additional signals over here on the left-hand side of the screen. This way, when you're driving around, the detector is going to visually and audibly alert to whatever the highest priority signal is, but it's going to also keep you up to date as far as the signal strength and the band of up to 3 additional signals. And, you know, as they come and go, you're going to be able to still see that on screen as needed. And that's what the all threat display is for. If you leave it turned off, it's just going to keep showing you the speed or compass or whatever you have it set to. That's going to remain displayed on the left side of the screen. Next, we have the ability to adjust the display color. We've got a couple different options here, as you can see, and you can use this to choose maybe whatever you think looks best, or you can set it maybe green for Christmas, you know, something for festive for the holiday season, or maybe more practically, whatever just happens to suit the same color of your car's interior. So you can choose whatever color you like. Now, we also have the ability to adjust what's on the display when there's no signal present. We can have it display the time. We can have it show this kind of scanning sort of heartbeat bar, which looks like this, kind of like an EKG screen. And then we can also just have it display the mode to basically say, you know, if we are in highway, city, or advanced mode, and it'll just display it right there. And again, we can press and hold the mute button to switch between different modes like this, and then it will show us right here on screen. My favorite is displaying the time, but again, whatever works best for you. Now, on the left side of the screen, remember how it was displaying my speed, which is 0 miles an hour since I'm parked? You can have it display your speed as well as your direction of travel with a compass. You can have it display just the compass. You can have it display your vehicle voltage as well as your altitude, which I guess is kind of cool if you're in the mountains or whatnot. That's fun. But otherwise, maybe speed or speed and compass I think is the most useful. You can have it display everything in miles per hour or in feet for your altimeter, for example. Or you can have everything display in kilometers per hour or meters, maybe distance to a red light camera. So whatever works best for you. I find it nice when I go to Canada, I can just switch it right there. Now we also have the option to customize whatever the alert tones we want are. Let's just go ahead and play them real quick. So as you can see, we've got 12 different customizable alert tones for all of the different radar bands, as well as for laser. Now we also have auto mute capabilities, which is the idea where the detector, if you have it turned off, it'll always alert at full volume. However, if you want the detector to go quieter on you after it's got your attention initially, you can turn on auto mute, it'll alert at full volume, and then it will reduce volume after that. We also have the ability to adjust how loud or how quiet the auto-muted volume is. So you can see we've got our controls here, several different volume levels. You can have it go totally silent if you like, or maybe reduce the volume level. So for example, I've got it set to volume 2, and then I can adjust my main volume when I'm here in the main screen, go up and down. So for example, I could have normal alert at volume 4, and then it will drop the auto-muted volume down to level 2. Something to be aware of is if you have the main volume set to 2, for example, and auto-muted volume level 2, well, it's going to stay the same volume once it drops down to the auto-muted level. This is something common that I see people worry about of like, hey, I have auto mute turned on, but it's not actually getting quieter. I've even seen auto mute get louder if the person has the normal volume set to 1, but the auto mute sets to level 2. It's possible for the auto mute to make the detector louder. So weird things can happen if you don't quite set it right. So just something to be aware of. Next, we can adjust the dark mode. Basically, if we have the detector's display set to dark mode where it's turned off by default, and then it gets an alert, you can choose how bright the display goes in dark mode. So maybe you can have it be, full brightness like in daytime, or you can choose dim or dimmer. So you have the ability to adjust how bright it gets when it pops up because an alert is received. We also have the ability to adjust our automatic dimming brightness levels and this will only show up if you actually have it set to the auto brightness level. We can go in here and we can say the bright level, such as daytime. We've got a couple options as far as how bright it's going to be. I think bright is probably the best way to have it operate in the daytime. And then at night, we can adjust how dim does it get. So we can have bright, of course, dim, even dimmer, which is the darkest level. We can have it be dark, which is going to be off until we have an alert, and then it wakes up. We can have it off altogether. And then, of course, we can just go back and, set it to dim. Oh, it looks like we don't have the bright option, which I guess makes sense here. Next, we've got the backlight, which allows us to turn these buttons right here on and off as needed. Quiet Ride is our low-speed muting. This is really helpful. We've got a number of options here, and basically the idea is when we're traveling below this speed, any sort of X-band or K-band alerts will get a quick initial alert, and then the detector will go quiet. Now this is really helpful around town if you're just kind of sitting in traffic or you're stuck at a red light or something. The detector can stay extra quiet when you're traveling below this speed. This is low speed muting and it's really, really helpful around town. Next we have our kind of alert if you're traveling above this speed. So if you're like, hey, I want my detector to remind me if I'm traveling over, let's say 70 miles an hour, you can set this right here and it's just an additional heads up to be like, hey, you're speeding, pay attention. Or you can just have that turned off altogether. Next, we have our time zone controls, so depending on where you live, you can just adjust your time zones right there. You can also turn daylight savings time on and off, and so if you set your time zone but you find it's off by an hour, either ahead or behind, just go in and try changing the setting. And of course, it's an easy way to change the time once daylight savings time kicks in or goes away. Our battery warning, this is a useful feature where if you're running your car, or you're pretty much like I'm doing right now, I don't have my engine on and I'm running off of battery, the detector can let you know if the voltage drops down below 11 volts and you're getting to the point where like, hey, you're draining your car battery too much, it may have trouble starting later. And if you want, you can have it warn you when it detects that your voltage has dropped below 11 volts. Now, another option is the battery saver. The battery saver is handy, and it's basically saying what happens if you have your radar detector plugged into a power source that always has power, including when your car is turned off. In that situation, if the radar detector is staying on, I don't necessarily just want a warning that my battery is going too low. I want it to actually shut itself off. In this situation, when it detects that you've been parked for a while, either that you're at 0 miles an hour, or you've lost GPS because maybe you're in a parking garage. In that instance, the detector will actually turn itself off. I forget if it's 30 minutes or an hour. I'll just put it on the bottom of the screen. But basically, the detector will turn itself off. That way, it doesn't drain your car battery, and that's a useful feature if you have it plugged into a power source, maybe a cigarette lighter or hardwire or something, that always provides power even when your car is off. This is a useful feature for you. Next, we have the self-test feature. Personally, I don't really like it, and it's one of the first things I always turn off. The idea here is when the detector starts up, here, I'll go ahead and play it for you. It's just going to do a quick self-test and play the different radar and laser alerts. Now, personally, I like to turn this off because the self-test doesn't actually do anything else other than that. It's not actually testing for any sort of issues or malfunctions with the detector upon startup. It would be nice if it did, but it doesn't do that. All it's really doing is just kind of playing a quick demo of the alerts, and I guess you can verify that the screen is working and the speaker is working, but other than that, it's not really that useful. And for that reason, I actually turn it off to just get a totally silent startup. Next, we have the ability to reset all of our settings to factory defaults. To reset all of your settings, you basically just press the
Factory reset completed
menu button like that. And as you can see, it reset all my settings, my voice turned back on, all that kind of stuff. Now, something to be aware of is if you want to reset your factory defaults, this doesn't clear your GPS lockouts. And it also does not clear any of your manually created user marks, for example. And so if you're worried about that, let's say you do a firmware update and then the update recommends resetting your settings back to factory default, all of your lockouts will remain. Don't worry about that. A lot of people are worried about losing them, but they will remain. Now, if we'd like to clear all of our GPS lockouts, we can do that by going to this next one, delete all mute locations, essentially. We can do that and press the menu button, and it will delete all of your GPS lockouts. So all of them are now gone. Next, if we want to delete all of our manual user marks that we've created here with the mark button, we have an option here in the menu as well, and we can clear all of those. And again, a shortcut to doing that is just pressing and holding the mark button like this, and then it'll also give us the option to delete all the user marks, and we can do that right here in the menu. Next, we can go in and take a look at our current firmware version, which is 1.02, and then we can also see the current GPS database, which is loaded in right there. So at April 3rd, 2018, we always have the option, of course, of updating the detector. There's a USB port right there, and that's how we update it. Plug it into the computer, grab the update software, and you can download the latest firmware as well as the latest red light camera and speed camera database. So awesome, there you go. There's a look at the different buttons, features, settings, and options in the Uniden DFR9. Again, there's going to be more information down in the video description as far as my website tutorial with all this information, an overview as far as down in the video description, a timeline as far as when we talked about anything, if you want to quickly skip back to something, where you can pick up the detector, as well as finally, down in the article on my website, at the very bottom, you'll find my general recommended settings for most people, as well as my preferred settings that I run on my DFR9. So awesome. Hope this has been helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. And yeah, that's it for now. Happy driving, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Operate within small subsections of all of Ka band.